The thing is that the people who are fighting, most of them are between the age of 16, 21.
Right.
You know?
Like the Sandinistas, whose average age was like 18 or something.
Those people are going to school, they're going to work if they have work, they're living with their parents.
Right.
You know, they're taking time out and they're going and they're fighting a guerrilla war, but they're not sort of faceless strangers in the area.
Right.
They're going back to their street and they're going to their school and they're doing their study and they're trying to be as normal as possible.
As they can be, right.
Eventually, because of their activities, they're forced into going on the run from the British.
Right. Right.
And then they go full time into the operations side,
right.
you know. And then their days are numbered, really.
Right. We're talking about.
When I was active, sort of it was very discriminatory in that they would really try to talk you out of joining the movement, you know. You had to go to something like 11 or 12 lectures, and they go into the history of the country,
right.
and just tell you that, you know, if you join the IRA, number one, you're going to spend a lot of fucking sleepless nights lying out in ditches and shit.
Right.
You're probably going to lose your wife if you're married. Right. You're going to do long terms in prison, and you're more than likely going to end up dead.
Right.
Right. There's been a war in Belfast and in Northern Ireland every 10 years of the minority trying to get their rights. And similarly, every year or every other year, there's been, you know, on the 11th of July, before the big march of the Loyalists, they get very drunk around a bonfire and they burn Lundy, and then they attack any small Catholic enclave close to them. I was working actually on a renovation of a pub. I was a joiner at the time, a carpenter, and it wasn't a Loyalist area. And when I went home, I just went home, went to bed, and I woke up the next morning and there had been massive rioting the whole previous night. But in my area, which is the largest Catholic area, you know, there was nobody attacked us, you know. And whole streets of Catholics had been burnt out, people killed. The Loyalists had just run amok on one of their periodic sectarian programs. The police came in behind the Loyalists in armoured cars using these big Browning 50-50s. There was a kid killed on something like the 10th floor of a block of flats in its crib by one of these police bullets. The police just came in and sprayed the entire areas with these heavy weapons, with this Loyalist mob in front of them throwing petrol bombs and burning people out and shooting people. My involvement in my politics come from what I observed happening in 68, 69 and what has happened since. You know, I don't justify the actions I took or what I feel by Irish history.
Right.
Because, you know, I don't feel that there's any need to bring up wrongs of the past to justify what is happening now. This was invaded 400 years ago or some shit like that, and the people have always been getting put down since then. There's sort of a cultural ethnic feeling that runs through the people anyway, you know, that is there, they know, they don't need to express it in political terms or anything else. It's just there, it's just a fear that people have, you know.
Would you say that the provisionals are politically motivated?
No, I wouldn't, because they've got no political motivation as we understand it. In fact, Jerry Adams, one of the leading people, made a speech at Bodenstown about a fortnight ago when he made it quite clear that he wasn't attempting just to drive the British out of Northern Ireland or anything like that, because he said that if that was achieved and there was, for argument's sake, a united Ireland of 32 counties, he'd destroy that too. They are just in the business of destruction.
Would you say, therefore, that they're mindless?
Well, to my way of thinking, yes.
So this area, the northern area is ruled from London, right?
Yeah, it's direct rule.
It doesn't have its own parliament. Or anything.
Well, for almost 60 years it had its own parliament, and it was allowed to do exactly as it wished, and it just brought in all these anti-Catholic laws. The Catholic was just like a nigger, you know, in the States, you know, it was there to be used.
Right.
And abused, you know. So whenever the partition of Ireland came, they decided that they would create a state which was the largest geographical area that they could control with a permanent majority. And that's decided that was the 6 counties, right? They actually abandoned a lot of their friends and brothers in the other counties of Ulster, because there's a lot of Protestants and in fact Loyalists still in these border counties with Northern Ireland, you know. But they cut their losses and took the north.
Right. These people up here have no input in terms, or no relation to the rest of Ireland?
Well, I mean, they've got a social commercial interaction
Exchange,
which
sure.
has to be there, but they're
Right.
they're politically and economically tied to Great Britain.
Right.
And are viewed as simply a province like Sussex or something.
Uh-huh.
Economically, politically, they're treated like some sort of colonial place. They've got all these special laws, special repressive laws, and all these special things apply to them.
That they don't have in this part of Ireland.
Oh no, they have it in that part of Ireland as well, but they don't have it in England.
I heard your briefing, and what you were
Because
saying was
the
very
South
reminiscent
of
of we've got to win the minds and hearts of the people.
Of course.
I heard that back in Vietnam.
Exactly. But that is our job over here, isn't it? We are protecting the people. We consider, and it is, that this part of the world is still part of the United Kingdom.
It may be the UK inside the walls, but outside on patrol, it is hostile territory.
This is part of the UK, no?
No, not to us. This is part of Ireland. At least we think it's Ireland anyhow.
And these soldiers?
But to us, they're an army of occupation.
Really?
Yeah.
You want them out?
Yes. Yeah, they're here just to keep the flag flying, nothing more, nothing less.
The IRA are a small group with limited funds,
Right.
and they've destroyed the British Army this past 10 years and continue to do it. The only way they can do that is because the vast majority of the Catholic population support them and let them use their houses and harbour them and give them funds and everything else. Because the IRA aren't a sort of a strange creature that springs up at the age of 18 and runs amok. They're all the kids from the area, you know. This isn't terrorism. I mean, if they wanted to,
No, I know
if
it's
they
not.
if they wanted to engage in terrorism purely to influence worldview, they would go along and blow up the subways in London and destroy a couple
Well,
of
no, I think that
jets or
killing
whatever.
a figure
Because they're all
like-
easy targets. They're easy to do, you know.
Sure, sure. But I
It is a
mean-
genuine war of national liberation.
Yeah,
Inside the
of course
provisional
it is,
IRA,
but I
you've got
mean,
every.
killing somebody like Mountbatten, for instance, was something. He wasn't a particularly strategic figure, except in terms of sensationalism
Yeah.
and doing something that would
Pretty
achieve.
rare case, I think.
No, I think that.
He is a rare case. You know. In terms of the war, Mountbatten and the campaign in London is a totally insignificant little
Right.
nothing, you know,
Right.
because
I know.
more than that is happening every day in the streets of Belfast.
Right.
The bombings in England, although I didn't agree with them, right, you could
Yeah.
see that, first of all, they were aimed at pubs where British soldiers drunk in.
Uh-huh.
And that was because, I mean,
Well, that's
we lived in
yeah.
Belfast. We were there every day of our lives, getting all this harassment of British soldiers. They came and done 4 months, and then they went back to London and got stoned and got drunk, and they didn't have to worry, you know.
Right.
The idea of that was to further demoralise the British Army, you know.
Yeah.
A side effect of that was that one bomb let off in England is worth 150,000 bombs let off in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
Because of the suppression of information from Ireland. But,
But
the
I think
main
that
the
I
main
think-
tack of that was to disconcert and disorientate British soldiers, to keep the tension up. Because when they're in Northern Ireland, they're really frightened. They're drugged.
Sure,
They're drugged
sure.
out of their heads, and they're drunk all the time, and they're really frightened.
Lee, when you go
But
out there on
there's
the street,
also- there's-
are you
I
a little
think
afraid?
that,
Yeah.
I mean, that,
A little bit.
Afraid of what?
Well, afraid of everything, you know, getting shot, bombed, blowing up. Yeah.
They don't like you.
Don't seem to like us.
What do you think about when you're out there on the streets?
Staying alive.
Now, how are you ever going to lick them?
I don't know the answer.
You don't believe you ever are.
But this time you were picked up and tortured, it was for something that had happened, or for something that had been done by a totally different group in Ireland, right? That you had nothing to do with.
Yeah, see, the thing was that internment was a month and a half old, and what they were doing was they would arrest, 10, 20 people per day
The
in each area.
internment was a thing where they could just pick people up for.
They just put you into a
questioning.
concentration camp, no trial, no charge.
Martial
Right.
law.
Martial law.
Um,
So you got picked up.
And they were arresting, say, 10 to 20 people in each area anyway, taking them away and torturing them to see what they may
what they
know.
could get out of them, yeah.
A proportion of those people were interned, and some were released, you know. And I happened to be one of the ones who fell foul of that. I got interned about a month and a half after the initial internment period.
And how long were you inside for?
I was interned for 14 months.
Well, do you think the internment drove a lot of people into sympathy with the IRA, or was it just another typical degradation?
No, they didn't drive people into sympathy with the IRA. It made people need to defend themselves because it was their brothers and sisters and themselves who were being locked up and denied trial and due process and everything else.
Right.
You know, it was a self-defensive thing.
But that's...
The IRA didn't exist when internment came out. The IRA was a very strong organisation, but it wasn't really fighting any great war. It was doing a little bit, but you know.
So that really irritated things, right?
That escalated the things beyond all comprehension. You know, when this campaign started, it wasn't started as a deliberate conspiracy. It was a self-generated thing. People were into quiet, peaceful civil rights demonstrations for one man, one vote, and one person, one house, which is a ridiculous thing to have to go and demonstrate for anyway, right? It was suppressed enormously by the government of Northern Ireland. People were attacked by loyalists, they were beaten down by the police, they were arrested, they were gassed, they were water cannoned.
What period was this?
This is 1960s, end of 1967, 1968. And for the first time, the world's television cameras were there and filmed all this. And so all the people, I suppose the most effect it had was on the people of Northern Ireland, because the people who didn't go to these demonstrations or, you know, couldn't be bothered seeing it on their tea time news, you know, all these friends of theirs being bludgeoned and killed, and, you know. And then whenever
they sort of polarized things, right?
Well, it was always polarized. You know, whenever the loyalists started attacking then, because the civil rights movement was getting so strong, the police came in on the loyalist side and started attacking Catholic areas. All the Catholic stroke nationalists could do was defend their own area. To do that, they had to generate a defensive organisation, and that defensive organisation was the Provisional IRA, you know. And still I see the vast majority of their actions as being purely defensive, you know.
On my knees, I beg
I mean, the people
to turn away from the path of violence and to return to the ways of peace.
I mean, there was a pope that gave Ireland to England, you know. The only English pope there ever was give Ireland to England, you know.
Colonel Peter Trenier Michel, 2nd Battalion Royal Green Jackets, on his 4th Ulster tour, confirmed that the IRA were proving a tough nut to crack.
How many men have you got to cope with this?
I've got here, myself, around about 600.
Why can't you deal with it?
Because it is very difficult to, with a terrorist organization, you need extremely good intelligence. And without that really first-class intelligence, you can have double the number of men, and you would still be very difficult to find them.
Is he cleverer than you?
I think probably much cleverer than me, yes, I think so.
There are German agents in Ireland, there are American agents in Ireland, there are British agents in Ireland, you know. They come under a lot of guises, they come as photographers, they come as sociologists, and they come as just immigrant workers, you know. They come as revolutionaries. The professionals have a very, very efficient intelligence service. I mean, the British had a system going for a while. I'll give you two instances. The British had a system going for a while where they set up their own laundry firm, Foursquare Laundry, right? And they would come around and launder your clothes cheaper than anybody else, right? And this laundry van had 4 SAS personnel run it.
SAS?
Right? Yeah.
What's that?
It's a special air service. It's like the Green Beret of the British Army. Assassination.
Yeah, right wing.
And inside their laundry van, they had a special secret compartment where they filmed out of and all this sort of stuff. And also, before they launder any of their clothes, they done forensic tests on it. Right, so if you'd been out shooting and you came running home and you said to your mother, clean this quick, she gave it the Foursquare laundry and they done a forensic test, and then they knew somebody out of that house was up to no good, you know, and that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But the IRA intelligence squad got onto this.
Foursquare laundry van came around.
And the IRA busted it and the office that had registered at the same time, and I think they killed about 3 or 4 of them, and one girl got away.
Those men took up arms very reluctantly, and they're some of the men who took up arms that I would trust with my own life today, whereas I would not trust the politicians who drove them to those things.
You can't be an absentee leader, you know. I mean, if you are going to direct the fight, you've got to be there.
Fighting.
Right? So you go through a period of, you know, not being known and doing a lot of fighting, and then being known and being on the run and doing a lot of fighting, and then you're either dead, you're in jail, or you're so fucking hot that you can't be on the scene anymore.
Like you.
You know, yeah.
I mean, you're on the run. I was thinking about that before, that when they get you on this thing, they defuse you politically, right? Because you can't.
Well, I mean, it depends. Not as soon as they would wish, you know.
But for you.
And then, I mean, there's a lot of before you leave, you pass on all the knowledge and intelligence you have to your successor. You know. So I mean, you the thing is that you cannot. Individuals are really irrelevant, you know. I mean, there's nobody has got that much intelligence or is that good at fighting that they can't be replaced by anybody else comes up behind them, you know. And while the experience you have gained fighting is very important, a fresh mind coming into your position can be as important, you know. By the time you become obsolete, maybe it's as well you moved on anyway. Because, I mean, there's no real thing as a brave person. Nobody who's fighting wants to be fighting, you know. They're fighting because they have to.
As I understand it, there are about 35,000 security forces under arms here in Northern Ireland against perhaps 500, 600, 800 IRA, keeping you immobilized, if you will. And when I say immobilized, they're beating you. Why?
They are not beating us.
10 years later, they're beating you. They killed 20 of your men the other day.
That is not beating us. If you imagine that killing 20 men, however tragic, is going to beat the British Army, give us another song.
I spent some time this morning at Cross McGlen down here.
Give us another song.
First-rate men who confess that they are frightened, that they want to get out, but they do not know, some of them said, what in the world they are fighting for.
I will tell you that the ones you have spoken to are very rare indeed. I know I can communicate with my soldiers, and I know that they understand why they are there, and I know their officers know, and I know they do.
The Catholics, the nationalists, whatever you want to call them, do not trust the British, they don't trust the loyalists, they don't trust the others, you know, and with good reason. We have been... Anything that's happened to any colonial people anywhere has happened to us twice. We don't want any Americans, we don't want any Russians, we don't want any fucker coming in and guaranteeing a solution, because all that means is somebody else is going to be shitting on your head.
Right.
You know, all we require is for people to declare that they're going to go away.
Do you think it's time the British thought about withdrawing?
No.
Why not?
Because depends what you mean by withdrawal. If you mean withdrawing troops, then troops will be withdrawn when the security situation allows. That is the whole intention. If you mean political withdrawal, which is another matter, the answer is no.
It's 2,000 miles away, but you got to make the connection. You got to look at the names of the people who are mentioned whenever these problems come up, and you got to look at what governments are involved in all the problems. You know, I mean, social democracy is repression with a soft glove on it, you know. The reason it survives is that we're able to sit in America or in England and we're able to get our pint and our steak and whatever goes on, and we don't mind whenever occasionally we hear about some poor shit being killed in a prison, or you know, all this repression that goes on, because we are comfortable enough. It's hard to identify the enemy. But the same people who are giving us this liberal thing here are doing all the repression in Northern Ireland and in Israel. It's just it's exactly the same government and the same people, but there they've had to take the mask off because there's opposition to them, you know. And people should be able to make the connection and say, well, if this is what they're doing here because people don't agree with them, then it's the same person, you know. You can't sort of divide the two things and say, oh, well, they've got to do that in Northern Ireland because of the situation, but at home they're really nice. It's the same multinationals, it's the same governments, you know. I mean, the time of national government is on the way out. It's all these supranational alliances. And everything's reduced to what natural resources you have in your country and what your strategic importance is. Ireland has got a lot of natural resources. We've got a very high level of technical education, so we're wide open for any multinational firm with a complicated process to come in and exploit. We've got the largest lead zinc mine in the world. We've got uranium now. Whenever these uranium mines are proved to be commercial, it'll be on uranium mines in the EEC. And also we're very strategically important to the NATO alliance because we're right on the edge of Europe. They want to turn us into some sort of joint tourist military complex that produces butter, you know. I don't believe that violence can fundamentally change anything at all. But there are special circumstances like Northern Ireland, which is the only place I can talk about. I see violence happening in Europe, and some of the people I see killed, I believe, I am not too worried about them dying, right? Because they've been oppressors and they've been the cause of a lot of other people dying. I can't mourn for them.
Right.
But as for what practical use that's going to have, I can't comment because I don't really know that much about that situation. But in Northern Ireland, until the six-county border goes, until the threat is lifted from the heads of the minority that they're going to be wiped out in the next loyalist program, then normal politics, whether it's anarchist or capitalist or Marxist or anything else, just doesn't have a look in. Right? So the start is to remove the people from the abnormal fear of being wiped out just because they happen to exist. They can go back to the ordinary fear of economic repression and all the rest, you know, but at least they can think and develop it without this double fear of being actually shot down in the street or taken away and tortured, you know.
It's incredible that the kind of the media, the way that it presents, you know, the IRA soldiers as terrorists and all these acts as terrorist acts, like it does with the PLO and like it's done with, like...
They're branded as malicious.
Yeah, they're branded as having a different morality to what, you know, like this woman getting shot in the street. That gets no coverage, you know, whereas 12 soldiers bombed or something or Mountbatten, right? Mountbatten's life gets, you know, worldwide sympathy. In fact, people feel sorry for him, you know. Yeah. But the bomber doesn't get any kind of, doesn't even get a chance to state his or her case, you know. Yeah. And I talked to people about the Mountbatten thing, and they said, you know, why kill an innocent, benign person, you know?
But he wasn't even benign.
Right. Exactly.
He was the rottenest old fascist ever walked. I mean, there's a letter in the Irish People this week from an Indian guy talking about what Mountbatten done in India, you know?
And he's presented as the liberator of India.
I mean, he left a thing in his will saying that no Japanese were allowed to come to his funeral because of what they'd done to the British soldiers in the Second World War. He did. Yeah. The Japanese ambassador wasn't allowed to come to the funeral, you know.
Right.
The majority of the people who now join the British Army know that there's a war on in Northern Ireland. They're told in the recruiting office, you're going to go to Northern Ireland, you're going to be in a war, you know. They join because they see themselves. Society has taught them that they got to be aggressive and they got to prove you're a man and all this sort of shit. And they're unemployed anyway. And they reckon they're going to go off and shoot a few patties for a few years and come back and get a good job, you know. They arrive in Northern Ireland and discover the patties shoot back. They discover that it isn't an isolated a band of gunmen, but it's an entire community against them. They're shitting themselves, you know. Yeah. They're taking all these drugs, they're taking all this drink, they're staggering about the place.
And they have to build a fort.
And they're just getting enveloped in all these waves of hate from everybody.
Just waiting.
I mean, you got like, you know, 5 Brits, and they're walking down my street, and they're between the age of 17 and 20. And they're done up in all this armour, all these flak jackets and all this stuff, so they look like these fucking big gladiators with this big high-velocity rifle. Yeah. And all around them, like as far as the eye can see, as far as they can think, there's these people that hate them, you know. And there's not that many guns, but they know that any window in this street, a gun could poke out and blow their head off. Yeah. You know, so they get really stoned, they get really drunk, and as soon as anybody farts, they get their head blew off, because they're going to defend themselves, right? So like I happen to be cleaning my bedroom, and I open up the window, and you know, and I'm gone, you know, because they're so frightened. Yeah. I mean, there are deliberate British Army assassinations as well, right? But a lot of the stuff is these kids being sent over, and you know, they're coming over to teach you a lesson, and they get in and they see what in fact the realities of war is. It isn't Robert Mitchum running up a beach in Burma, you know, playing a ukulele, you know, it's...
Armored cars and tanks and guns came to take away our sons, but every man will stand behind the men behind the wire. Through the little streets of Belfast in the dark of early morn, British soldiers came marauding.
He was killed because he was a Catholic, basically. We came along, I was living in Dublin at the time, and the works that he owned was a small upholstery works that was just across about 500 yards from a police station beside Milltown Cemetery, and it was always full of British soldiers. Like, they were always in the place. You couldn't go in or out without being stopped. The night he was killed, there wasn't one to be seen. And even whenever he was shot, the British in the police station 500 yards away didn't react to the shooting, didn't move, didn't do anything.
Do you think they knew about it before?
I believe that there must have been some sort of collaboration. But he was, as he was coming out of work, going down this laneway, he was stopped by his people and they tried to take him away. And loyalist assassinations always seem to incorporate torture and being cut up and a lot of brutality before they actually kill you. And he had always said that he would never allow himself to be taken away. And he always told us that if we were ever attacked in the street to fight, you know, and be killed in the street rather than be got into one of these cars that they drag you off to. So it appeared that he fought and they killed him on the spot. They ended up having to shoot him. See, there were 2 men. And he fought them and he ended up getting shot dead, you know. He wasn't found for 12 hours or 14 hours, something like that.
Did that change things?
Well, it changed things for me in that he was very close to me, and I still find myself waking up thinking about him sometimes. You know, but physically and you know, the other ways, not really. You know, I mean, I had moved out of the house, and that it affects me greatly in that my mother's a widow and she's very upset and I'm very close to her, and you know, she's got to be looked after and that sort of stuff. I got a phone call to Dublin telling me about it, and I went up to Belfast. I'll always wanted. And whenever the body was taken to the funeral, to the church, it was taken to the church to then go off to the funeral. When I was in the church, the British surrounded the chapel with armoured cars and dogs and all this sort of stuff. They said they were coming in to get me. But they were persuaded by the crowd. It was a very big funeral. And the crowd outside, the chapel was full, and there was massive crowd outside. They convinced them that it would be foolish to try it, so they all went away eventually. I didn't hear about it until afterwards. Yeah, she was very good. Just after the.
She was the first woman that became like an accepted member.
It's one of the first.
Tell that
yeah.
story because it's really good.
She was. She turned up to a standby, which was like we'd all have to sit in the house, and there'd be arms in the house in case something was going to happen. You know, maybe it would be a march going on, or maybe the British had been more active in the area, or loyalists were thinking of doing something, or you know. But you'd end up sitting in a house maybe with 15 people all sitting around the walls, and all these arms in the next room, waiting for something to happen. And when the women had just been accepted, this girl, who's a very good friend of mine, came in with 2 other girls, and they sat down, and they got this sexist banter thrown at them, you know. Oh, what do you think, and all this, all these real cocky macho boys, you know. And she got a Thompson submachine gun out of the armory, came in, and she sort of set it down. She turned out the light, just stripped it, like in about 15 seconds, in the dark, lit the light again, said, and it was all sitting out perfect. Right. Turned the light out again in about 15 seconds, put it back together in the dark, right? Lit the light again and said, there. And the guy who had been directing all this shit at her, she threw it at him and said, you do that. He didn't even know how to fucking take a magazine out of the thing, you know.
Sounds like something out of a
Gotcha.
movie.
The attack is on property, right? It's not on persons. So you have to give enough time for any particular area to be evacuated before your bomb will explode, you know. Usually that's half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, you know. And the British, I mean, I have got amazing respect for British Army bomb disposal. They're just incredible, you know. They go along, but they're really genned up. They're very, very good. They're very expertise. And if you give them 3/4 of an hour, 2 times out of 10 they're going to defuse the fucking bomb because they're good at it, you know. They walk up to a bomb that's going to explode any second and sit down, and as calmly as they can, they X-ray it and they film it and they start to try and take it apart. That's something that requires enormous courage, you know.
Yeah.
And what makes a good bomber, conversely, is not really the technical expertise, you know. Although that's very, very important. It's very important to be able to produce these sophisticated things, you know. But it's getting into the psychology
of planning the bomb.
Of the bomb disposal guy.
To try to outfox him, right?
Yeah. I mean, you say, okay, I put down this sort of bomb, he defused it. Therefore, I shall produce this bomb, which looks exactly the same, but in fact is this. Or you'll stick in lots of stuff that actually don't do anything at all. I stick in all these transistors and doodads and stuff, and they're all appear to be wired into the thing, and they're all over the fucking place, and they don't do anything at all. Right? Now he's sitting there and he's saying, okay, now this is probably such and such a person, bomber number 2. Right? And what he done previously was this. He threw all this shit and it didn't do anything. But then again, there was these couple of things that I didn't think done anything but did. You know, and he's got to try and second guess you, and you got to try and second guess him. You know, it's
yeah.
We were sort of permanently on the run. We had a free area. Every door was open to us. Every person was with us. You know, we just walked in anywhere, slept anywhere. People were really behind us. You know. We had barricades up. Whenever the British, we were sitting in houses, and we had people in the barricades. And when the British turned up, they would send us a message, and we'd fly down in a jeep or a car and engage them in fire, and we were keeping the whole area free. We were full of adrenaline, you know, and we were going doing these bombing runs in town. Yeah, we get really into it. We get really
the adrenaline stuff.
I mean, we were really, really frightened, although we wouldn't admit it. Yeah, we used to do things like we'd put a gallon of petrol in the car bomb because the TV cameras, the colour TV cameras would, you know, because, I mean, when a bomb goes off, it's sort of like, there's this big flash with blue veins running through it, right? And it's over, and then you've got dust and debris and shit falling down. It's not really that good a picture, you know. But if you put a gallon of petrol in it, you get this big orange plume going up like an atomic bomb. You get this really deep yellow colour with orange around the edge of it, and you've got the blue streaks of the high explosive going out. It's really impressive, you know. So we used to put occasionally throw a gallon of petrol in, so the TV cameras would get a good shot, you know. I mean, most of the bombs after interment and until I was interned were just, you know, bombs that you lit. You know, you had a 3-minute fuse. You went to the place, you lit the fuse, you threw it in, and you ran like fuck, you know. 3 minutes is a long time. Actually.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You know, I didn't believe that for weeks. That's what they tried to get me for in Dublin.
Right.
But the idea of charging me with a bank robbery in Dublin, I mean, they arrested me. I called at a friend's house, and he had been arrested the day before, and they said they had found a sawn-off shotgun underneath his bed. Right. I happened to call them.
But they can't prove anything.
Nice.
Yeah. So I robbed the door, and the special branch man answered the door and dragged me in and took me off to the Bridewell, and they kept me for 2 days and interrogated me. And they tried to implicate me in this shotgun offence. You know, even at this McPartland, this special branch man, McPartland, a northerner, you know, and he came in with a briefcase, and he said, threw it down. These two really young and experienced guys had been questioning me, been having great fun with them. But he came in, and he threw this briefcase down. He said, did you ever see this briefcase before? Before you answer now, I'm telling you that this will be taken down using the evidence. You're going to get done, you know. And I said, I never seen it in my life before. He said, okay. And he took out this shotgun, sawn-off shotgun, which had been broken in half, you know. And he's sort of fiddling with it all the time, you know. And he's saying, did you ever see this shotgun before? Now, before you say anything, I'm going to, you know, and I'm going, listen, I never seen that fucking thing in my life before. Go fuck yourself, McPartland, you know. And he said, oh yeah. He's funny, he said, do you know how to put this together? You know, and I says, nope. You know, roll up my arms, you know. And he got this shotgun, and he put it in the briefcase, and he jumped up, and he stormed out, and he slammed the door, and he kicked the door open again, and he said to the 2 other young branchers, he said, see that fucker, he knows more about interrogation than you 2 bastards put together, and started the door again. You know, but when they were releasing me, they said to me, listen, in exactly 1 week's time, we're going to charge you with a serious offence. Right? I said, oh, fair enough, you know. I went out and I thought it was all shit, you know. Exactly a week later.
They charged you with the bombing offences?
No, bank robbery.
Oh, bank robbery.
Bang, bang, bang. Answered the door. These 2 special branch men. You didn't believe us, you didn't. You know, drag me off. And charged me with this bank robbery. Right? And initially in the interrogation, they claimed that they had witnesses who had seen me in the bank, right? And I was saying, fair enough, bring them along, you know. So then they changed their story and they said, well, maybe we haven't got people who've seen you in a bank, but we got you for it, you know. And I was charged with it and immediately given this really easy bail, you know. So I get out in bail and I'm walking about the streets and I'm approached by the branch again. And they tell me that I've got to go and see their boss at this hotel in Dublin. So I reported to the people I need to report it to cover myself from being shot and being, well, not even from being shot, but from being disbelieved and my credit taken from me. It went along, and this branch man called Egan and another one called Ducey turn up, and Ducey's the boss. Right, and I had my solicitor deliver me to the meeting place, right, and he took a time away when I went in, and he told me to identify them, and I identified them, Ducey and Egan, and they took me off around to this pub, and they took me to the pub, and they took me into this warehouse area, and sort of we're walking down through this big warehouse area, and they're saying, well, see now, nobody can hear you, there's no flats overlooking, nobody can hear a thing you say, and everything they asked me about was, what did I do in Northern Ireland? Where did I keep my explosives in Northern Ireland? Did I get anything in the south? What did I know about London? Not the fuck a thing about robbing banks in Dublin, you know? Not a word, you know? And would I spy on the IRA in Dublin? And all this sort of stuff, you know? So I said, like, you know, if I knew of any law being broken, of course, as a citizen, I would report it. I mean, that's the law, you know. But that I don't, and I didn't, you know. So what could I do for them, you know? And they said, well, you were well in the north and all this sort of shit, and you can go along around these Republican pubs and keep your ears open. And they arranged to meet me the day before it was up for another remand, right? And I would give them information, or else they would give me another charge, transfer me to the Special Criminal Court and deny me bail, right? But if it did come across with information that they weren't able to withdraw my charge because they'd already charged me, but they could guarantee it would never come to court, provided I continued coming across with information. I know, but like, if I kept coming across the information, they could keep postponing it, you know. So I never turned up for the trial, needless to say. I absconded.
That's when you left.
Well, it was unfair. It was very unfair pressure on me, you know. I mean, I knew I hadn't robbed the bank, but the pressure they were putting on, you know.
Well, it could get really awful.
So my wife was pregnant, and she went home to Belfast to have the baby. So there was a truce on at the time, and I went up to visit her to see how she was for a few days, you know.
So if there's a truce, you can...
Well, allegedly no Republicans were to be arrested. I discovered differently when I got out. I was the exception. But I was drinking in this pub in Lenadoon with my wife and a friend, and we came out about 12 o'clock at night, and I'm walking up through the housing estate, and all the lights are out, and the Brits control the lights, you know. I get very suspicious, and I seen these shadows up the street, you know, and I sort of stopped and said, I got Brits up there, I don't think I should walk up there, you know. And the only other way out was this entry to the side, and I went to turn into the entry, and there were other Brits in the entry. There were commandos in the entry, and Royal Fusiliers up the street, because they were just changing over, you know. So I walked on up, and they stopped us. And they asked me for my identification, right, which I gave them at this false ID. And they went off on the radio and it in. It was a really cold night. And we were there about half an hour. And I decided that was enough. And I went over and started fighting with this Brit. You know, I said, listen, this woman's pregnant, and how dare you stop us in the street? And there's a truce on, all this shit, you know. And he says, oh, listen, the lady and the other gentleman can continue. It's just you we're checking out, right? And then this Jeep pulls up, and an officer jumps out. And he's got this blown-up photograph of me about that size, you know. And he pulls me onto the only lamppost that's lit, and he says, who's that? And I said, never seen him in my life before. And he says, come on. He says, I know you fucking years. Don't tell me it's not you, you know. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm so-and-so. I can't even remember the name I had, you know. And he grabs me and fucks me into the back of this Jeep. And he drives off, you know. I get up to the British Army fort, and I'm sitting in the fort, and they don't hit me, they don't beat me, they don't do fuck all, none of the usual shit at all. I'm sitting there and the IO's talking away to me, you know. And he says, listen, do you know what they want you for, you know? And I said, nah. And he said, well, it's for, and he named this particular bombing in Lisburn, which had happened when I was in Dublin, and it was my wedding anniversary, and I was having dinner with friends at the time it happened.
You had like a concrete
you know,
alibi.
and I said, but Jesus, you know, and I told him, you know, where I was, and he said, listen, I know that. He says, I know the provisionals are too fucking mean to pay your train fare from Dublin to come down and do a bombing, especially on your wedding anniversary. He said, I'm giving you the score. Don't let on to the police that I told you this, you know, but that's what they want you for, you know. So you sit there now and you think for a while, and you get your alibi together, and then whenever they pull you for it, you'll have the score. And fair play, that's what they did pull me for, you know, initially. When the main damage was done to you before the interrogation centre, it would be the Brits who actually scooped you off the street, that beat you up in the armoured car going up to the army compound, and that would soften you up for the British IO. And then after you went to the interrogation centre, you get more beaten, you know.
Britain, Sir Kenneth Newman, heads the RUC. We asked him about the torture charges.
I don't rule out for one moment that in a civilized country or any other country, there are people in any organization who will fall below the high standards set by that organization, of course.
What you're saying is that there is not a systematic...
There is absolutely no systematic, any question of this. The whole system is against it.
And a guy, like you sort of starting with your legs right open, and you're like this, and there's three of them around you, behind you, and they're swinging at punches and hitting your stomach, and you're folding up, and they're putting it back up again. And this fucking branch man just puts a big boot right between my legs, you know, crushes my balls, and I just collapse in a heap. And I pass out. And they wake me up, and they put me against the wall again. They ask me another question, and I don't answer it, and I do the same again, you know. And I've done it 3 times. And then they dragged me out, and they threw me back into the main interrogation room. And they were all doing press-ups at the time. And I was fucking, listen, I was terrified. I would have done fucking anything for anybody except talk to them. But I was genuinely terrified. And I was down there, and there was this fucking big uniformed cop standing over me with this big button. And they were saying, okay, you gotta do your press-ups with all the rest, you know. And I was pressing with all the strength I fucking had. I was praying to God that I don't fucking believe in. You know, and I couldn't move. I couldn't move a fucking millimeter. And he was beating my back and saying, press up. And I was really pushing, and I couldn't fucking move. Because my balls had swollen about 3 times the size they were, you know. And then they were giving us chores through this, you know. They'd take you out to wash the floor or something like that, you know. And they dragged me out. I had to polish this Jeep, right? And the car I was caught in had 6 false number plates in the boot. Did I mention that? No. It had 6 false number plates in the boot, right? So I'm bending over and I'm polishing this Jeep, and every time I bend over, this RUC man gives me this unmerciful smack on the arse with this dial rod, you know, about a 1/2-inch dial rod, you know. It was indescribably sore, you know. And I'd sort of look at him and go, oh, you know, and he'd say, polish that, you know, and I'd look at him and I'd bend down to polish it. And as soon as I got down, he'd whack, you know. And there was the Brit who had driven it in, he calls me over. And he says, listen, Paddy, he says, who's the leader of the Free Presbyterian Church? And I say, Dr. Ian Paisley, right? And he says, correct. He said, what do you call the Pope? What's the Pope's name? And did I know the Pope's name? No way did I know the Pope's name. I said, I've no idea. And I went into this big rant and rave about he was a Catholic, an English Catholic, and how we were bringing bad news in the faith and all this sort of stuff, you know. And he pulled out his pistol, right? He stuck it into my mouth, right? And he said, do you know what this is? And I said, it's a gun, you know. And he said, yeah, it's a gun. He said, do you know what happens when I do this? And he cocked the pistol, right? And I said, I think the wee bullet goes up into the thing. He says, that's right, Paddy, yeah. You know, and he held it to my mouth, you know, and he said, say God save the Queen and all this sort of shit, you know. I said, God save the Queen and all this sort of shit. And he said, do you know what would happen if I pulled this trigger? I said, yeah, I think that the bullet that's in the wee thing would fire and would hit me, you know. He said, that's right, Paddy. And he pulled the fucking trigger. And click.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And you see, I had seen pistols before, right? And he knew that. And the pistols I had seen anyway, whenever the magazine's empty, they lock open when you cock them.
Right.
And he had the magazine fixed so that he could cock it empty.
Right.
And the bullet wouldn't go up. So I knew there was a fucking bullet in that gun.
Right.
You know? And you know, one night, I don't know, really late, early in the morning, you know, he called me out into the room where all the policemen are. And he got a boiled egg. He took a boiled egg. I was starving. Like, I was really starving. And I was beat to shit. I could hardly walk, you know. And I look at him and he says, do you want this boiled egg? And I said, yeah. You know? knowing at the back of my head I wasn't going to get it, right? So he gives it to me and he takes it back and he shells the egg, right? And he said, no, do you want a sandwich? You know, do you want an egg sandwich? And I said, yeah, I love an egg sandwich. And he says to this uniformed pig, right, make an egg sandwich. The pig gets the bread, he butters the bread, he slices the egg, he puts the egg on it, you know. Do you want some salt? Yeah. Do you want some pepper? Yeah. Anything else? No, thanks. Puts the top on it, cuts it in half, puts it on a paper plate, hands it to me. I get this egg. Thanks a lot. Go back into the room. He says, no, wait a minute. Do you want a cup of tea? A cup of tea. Yeah, love a cup of tea, you know. Get them a cup of tea. Pour me out a cup of tea in this cup. Do you want milk? Yeah, milk. Sugar? Yeah, sugar. You know, puts the sugar in it. Gives me the cup, so I've got this sandwich in one hand and this cup of tea in the other hand. The saliva is just running down my chin, you know. And I go walk back in it. Thanks a lot. Go to walk back. He said, listen, come here. He says, they'd all be really jealous of you in there if you went in and ate that egg sandwich and drunk that tea. They haven't been fed for fucking a day, you know. And I said, no, you know. He said, listen, come over to my room and eat it there, right? Which is in the interrogation block. So he takes me over to the interrogation block.
You haven't touched the sandwich, it's like...
No, I can't, you know. I mean, the interrogation block is another building, right? And it's sort of got something like 5 interrogation rooms and an office at the end, you know. So he brings me down to his room, we'll go in. And I sit the tea down, eat these sandwiches, drinking tea. He's eating sandwiches and drinking tea as well, you know. He starts giggling. I'm looking at him, you know. He's going, you know, like real... And then another policeman comes in plain clothes, and he's got this big, what do you call it, trifle?
A what? Trifle?
A trifle. Like it's a sponge cake,
dessert, you know,
an inverted sponge cake with all this fruit and cream and all in it. That's trifle.
Trifle?
Yeah. He's got this big fucking trifle, like giant. You know, and he walks in, and Harry Taylor, that's the branch man, he says to him, where'd you get that? You know? And he says, I stole it of the soldiers. Right? And Harry says, Jesus Christ, you'll have us killed. You know, if they find out we stole that, we'll have to eat it all now. And he looks at me and he says, do you like trifle? And I said, do I what? You know? And he cut this thing up into thirds, right? And he just grabbed a bit and grabbed it into his face. There was fucking, you know, bits of fruit going everywhere, like a real Billy Bunter scene, you know. And like I was no different. I was starving. I grabbed it and I was cramming everything and I could get in it, you know. And I get all this food into me and I'm waving it off and I'm drinking my tea, you know. And he's looking at me going, "Oh, that was great," and he's making fun about the Brits, you know. And I'm going, "Yeah, great," you know. And he says, "Come here to show you something," you know. So I hobble out behind him, right? I'm covered in blood. My clothes are in rags. My balls are swollen to about 3 times the size. I'm walking like John Wayne, you know. And he brings me down to the office, right? And he says, listen, walk in behind me. Pretend you're one of us, right? He walks in this suit, looking fresh. I drag in behind him, looking like this. And there's one uniformed policeman there, and he says to him something like, oh, was Joe here, you know? And he says, no, Joe's not here. And he says, okay. And he walks out, and I walk up behind him. And he opens up every door of every interrogation room and shows me they're empty, right? And we'll go back into the interrogation room, we'll sit down. And he says, okay, listen. It's whatever time it was in the morning. There's nobody in this building. You can tell me now. Nobody will know you said, when did you join the IRA, you know? And I said, come on, leave me alone. And they beat me until I vomited up all the fucking trifle, all the egg sandwich I got. I mean, all the food I got was just spewed out all over the floor.
I think the provisionals can never be beaten.
Yes.
Why?
Because I think that if one can be effective in one's operation, I think one can beat them. Yeah, I'm afraid it's going to take a little time. I don't say that they will cease to exist. When I say beaten, I think what I mean is that the amount of damage they are able to inflict on the community will be reduced to so much that it really won't constitute a threat to a normal way of life as it does at the moment.
What about General Glover's remarks of his assessment that they have the dedication and the sinews of war to wage war for the foreseeable future?
No, but that may be the case. I mean, this is his opinion, but it doesn't mean to say we can't beat him. What we're seeking to do is not to beat them in a kind of military battle. They're being tackled on the basis of the operation of the law. And that is where the police have such a crucial role to play, because what we're seeking to do is to catch them and bring them to justice. And, you know, there is really quite an impressive record of success. I mean, for example, last year, no less than 876 people were convicted in the courts of terrorist crimes.
And they instigated this form of court where there's just one judge and no jury, and where if two policemen get up and say, you said something, then you did, right? Two detectives get up and say, I was talking to Michael yesterday and he said he raped Anne yesterday afternoon, then you did. Whether Anne says you didn't or not, it's irrelevant. Right. You did it, you know. And you see, what they'd done was they interrogated me for 3 days. I didn't talk to them, and they invented this verbal statement for me. They said that I admitted doing this sort of like 2 hours before I was due to be released because of no evidence against me, and that I then refused to sign the statement I had made, right? Mm-hmm. And I was locked up in jail, denied bail for this. And they have a thing called depositions, which is you have to go before a magistrate with the evidence, and the magistrate decides whether there's a prima facie case, whether there's a case to be heard or not for the higher court. Right. Whenever we went along to the depositions, the RUC withdrew 3/4 of the statement because they said it had never happened. Right? I had confessed to these things, according to them, that had never even happened at all. But they said that they wanted to let stand the 1/3 of the statement, which said that I had made these timing devices. And the magistrate ruled that there was a prima facie case for me to answer and that I should go to trial.
God, that's outrageous.
I know it's outrageous. And I was sent back to jail. They applied for my extradition from Dublin. Right. Now, the law in Dublin says that you can't be extradited for a political offence. But in order to prove that that offence is political, you virtually have to admit that you've done it.
Have to admit to it, yeah. Right.
So, whenever I got acquitted of this bank frame-up, I never got out of the court. I was rearrested immediately and had this extradition warrant put upon me and was taken off to another court, but I got bail. And I had to swear an affidavit for the High Court saying that whenever these things happened, I was a member of the IRA, and that the actions were taken under the orders of the IRA, and all equipment used, like all the explosives, clocks, timers, etc., were the property of the IRA, and that was for political aim, right? That stopped me being extradited to Belfast, where I wouldn't have got a fair trial. But at the same time, if I ever got back there now, they can use that as evidence against me, as opposed to this perjured evidence.
Right. And that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here, yeah.
Right.
If they apply to extradite me, then they're going to put a bail on me, and that's a bail I'm not going to be able to raise. I'm not going to give myself up, and I'm certainly not going to talk to them about anything that went on in Ireland. So I can expect at least $500,000 bail. I can't raise that. So I can look forward to at least 6 months in the federal prison. I'm in the States, and I'm getting a bit of hassle, but I reckon I could throw that off, you know. But the chance to say something on a videotape that maybe will get through to somebody else, it's not something I have the right to turn down, you know.
No.
I mean, regardless if it means that I'm going to get deported or if I'm going to be locked up for 6 months or something, it's like nothing. I mean, I know a guy, 17 years old, he's in H Block for 15 years.
No,
and he's laying in this shit and maggots, you know. And I feel like sort of not doing this. You know, I feel like just, you know, clearing off for a few months and coming back and getting a nice life together and all that shit. But then when I think of him, when, you know, I wake up every morning and I look about and I'm depressed because I'm not doing the things I want to do. And then I think of where I probably should be. And I get really happy, you know. And I just think I got to do this for the same reason.